आसान नहीं है लेकिन negotiation अभी बाकी है मेरे दोस्त. Watching England being rolled over in Lucknow in front of 49,998 ecstatic Indians, whilst me and my friends watched with our head in our hands as the England batsmen were just knocked over by the brilliant Jasprit Bumrah. I think all countries are having to adjust to the nature of China, and I think we saw that perhaps very strongly during COVID in particular. Year of Democracy is 2024. I think the election in Russia reminds you what a sham democracy looks like. It's a complete joke. Our security minister made when he came out last year, he said, extremism, Muslim extremism isn't an Indian problem, it's a UK problem. That we don't want our people to be radicalized. आसान नहीं है लेकिन negotiation अभी बाकी है मेरे दोस्त.
Bollywood is captured you.
The negotiations have been going on for 2 years. I remember them being launched by our then Trade Minister Anne-Marie Trevelyan a couple of years ago. And FTAs take a while. The EFTA one took 15 years, I think, to negotiate. Both sides, I think, want an FTA. Both prime ministers made clear they want an FTA, and they spoke, I think, only last week to reaffirm their desire for it. It's not a straightforward negotiation because you have two similarly sized economies, but very differently shaped. India's economy is much more agriculture-based, obviously much poorer in terms of GDP per capita. UK economy is much more integrated in its manufacturing, its goods, with the rest of Europe because of the legacy of being a member of the European Union. So it's not surprising this thing's quite hard. People want, and both sides want to have real new market access. They want something ambitious. In fact, encouragingly, trade has been growing fast. UK-India trade has actually grown, I think it's doubled since 2020. So it's really fast. Of course, that's a COVID number. It was a little higher in 2019, but even 2019 it's grown by well over 50%, up to about 4 lakh crore, if I've got that number right. I'm looking at my lakh crore experts at the back. They're trying not to catch my eye. So it's grown a lot. But we can see economic advantage in having a trade deal. And also, I think, strategic advantage as well, because it shows that the fifth and sixth biggest economies in the world can reach an agreement to very big democracies. That's probably quite a good thing for the world as well as for ourselves. So yeah, we've come a long way, but these things aren't easy, and you have to take the time you have to take to get them right. I think both sides are pretty clear about that. I think all countries are having to adjust to the nature of China, and I think we saw that perhaps very strongly during COVID in particular, or at least of Xi Jinping's China. And our then Foreign Secretary said last year that we're both strengthening ourselves domestically. We have a whole raft of new legislation about how to protect, for example, abuse of the education sector or investments. We have to work with others, of which India is a very obvious example, by working with allies and friends. And we have to engage where that's necessary, for example, on climate change. I actually think that most countries are doing a mix of those three things, including India. There is no doubt we talk in much greater depth and much greater breadth with the Indian government about how to deal with geopolitical competition, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. And that can stretch from, and I think that is one of the big drivers of increased cooperation. We talked about defense. I won't get into details, but there's a lot more security cooperation than there was. I think it even is one of the reasons which is driving us closer together on trade as well, and on investments. The UK, I think, is the third biggest of the main countries investing in the UK in terms of in India in terms of stock. Very big growth in investments. And at the same time, India is a big investor in the UK. So it's a sort of underpinning factor, that geopolitical competition, alongside India's own growth, for why we are doing so much more together. At the time, actually, I think the police did arrest somebody, but I think that you have to put that into a broader context. I'll step back and put it in a much broader context, which is basically a very good story, which is the flow of talented people from India to the UK, and the role which they play in life in the UK more generally. Our population in the UK is getting quite a lot more diverse. The 21 census, I think, shows that big increase in ethnic diversity in the UK, and most of that is fantastic, frankly. With that flow comes some trickier issues as well, and I think there's a much greater recognition now by the British authorities, by my country, than there was maybe a few years ago, about that that we have to deal with all forms of extremism. Extremism, wherever it comes from, you have to tackle it. And I think more importantly, this is the point our security minister made when he came out last year. He said, extremism, Muslim extremism isn't an India problem, it's a UK problem. That we don't want our people to be radicalized. Now, a lot of the best work for dealing with that is done upstream, not downstream. A good doctor doesn't want the patient coming in with a heart attack. They want to deal with the issue upstream. That's why we have done a lot of work actually over the last year in terms of talking to the different communities in the UK to make sure that we continue to have a very harmonious country. There will always be incidents. That one was a very deeply regrettable one, but I think we've done quite a lot of work both to understand the issue and also to address it upstream. And I think that must be the right approach. So, we're talking about this because Russia invades Ukraine. It's important to remember that. It's not because the West is challenging, it's because the Russians have taken part of the land of their neighbor and now want to take the whole of their neighbor, democratic country, and deprive its citizens of the right for any kind of self-determination. It's sometimes, things in life are tricky, and sometimes they're pretty clear. In this case, it's pretty clear what's going on. If you remember back in February 22, everyone assumed that the Russians would just walk into Kiev. Well, obviously that hasn't happened at all. What you have is a grim, attritional war inside Ukraine, one in which people are being killed, including Indian nationals, I think, entirely because of Russian desire to take over their democratic neighbor. You mentioned Putin got re-elected. If this is the year of democracy, 2024, I think the election in Russia reminds you what a sham democracy looks like. It's a complete joke, the pretense of democracy. So, from the United Kingdom's point of view, it's very important that autocratic might does not prevail. That's why we support Ukraine in many different ways, and why others are doing the same. I think the risk is, and you're right to refer to the Integrated Review Refresh, which actually said that even though Russia has invaded Ukraine, it's still really important that we pivot to the we tilt to the Indo-Pacific. I think if Russia is the storm, then the Indo-Pacific is really the weather, the long-term weather system. But the continuing war in Ukraine could make that a bit harder because of the amount of pressure which is being put on our own kind of continent and landmass. We'll keep doing what we need to do in order to support Ukraine to have its right to self-determination, to right to live with its own frontiers, and we will keep at it. That is really important to us because that is. I do not think we want to send the signal that it is okay to invade your neighbor and just take their country. We were swift to condemn the attacks by Hamas on the 7th of October, and with good reason. Murderousness and rape used as a tool of war in order to horrify and kill many Israelis is something we unequivocally can condemn. Now, we're in a situation where we must allow, we have to find some way to having some kind of sustainable solution in Gaza. And most immediately, we have to get the hostages out. We have to get more aid in. The UK is a major supplier of humanitarian aid to Gaza, but we are very tough with the Israelis about allowing more access for humanitarian aid into Gaza, given the conditions there. We need to create a more sustainable, we want to stop the conflict from escalating across the region. That's why our Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, is constantly in the region to try to reduce the risks of escalation. And also why we push for the long-term restoration of a Palestinian Authority government in the West Bank and in Gaza, and ultimately for a two-state solution. We're very clear about that. You have to find a long-term sustainable solution to this problem. Any kind of UK-India relationship will have its ups and its downs, and most of what we do, we talk frankly between friends about areas where we agree and where we disagree. The BBC, I think, is an excellent and trusted organisation. Use organisation in other areas as well. Won't go into the details. We talk a lot to the Indian government, we talk to the BBC, and they most importantly talk to each other about how to find the right way to respect the laws of India and operate as an independent news organisation, which is, amongst other things, what they are. I got several high points because it's such a great country to live in because of its incredible diversity. You can go from, I was looking into, and I'm going to get it, Bharatanatyam, a dancer, amazing dancer in Chettinad on New Year's Eve, incredible artist. And then you go up to staring at the Himalayas whilst England are collapsing in front of you in Dharamsala. You can go to Stepwell and Ahmedabad in June, it's so hot, through to Kolkata, batting at Eden Gardens, which I did a couple of, on Boxing Day, I think it was a couple of years ago. You get this great variety, obviously, a great variety of food, and that's something which, I love about India. I loved it when I lived here before, and I absolutely love it still. Watching England being rolled over in Lucknow in front of 49,998 ecstatic Indians, whilst me and my friends watched with our head in our hands as the England batsmen were just knocked over by the brilliant Jasprit Bumrah, was perhaps a low moment. Although I have to say, Indian cricket fans were very funny. They got a great sense of humour and actually were very kind when we were hurting the most. So it's a country, obviously, all countries have the highs and lows. India maybe is a little bit more intense in the highs and a little bit more intense in the lows. But that excitement about being in a country which really is kind of, which the UK's partnership is really motoring, that is a great thing. It's been fun to be at the beginning of a real reset and driving of a different kind of partnership. It's interesting, your questions really touched on all those areas, whether that's the Living Bridge, climate, health, defence, trade and investment. Those are all kind of absolute central parts of what we're trying to do. And in every area, we are motoring ahead. Of course, there's a long way to go. And I always say I do my job for my successor's successor. It's a 10-year job to do that transformation. But it's just fantastic. It doesn't always happen in a diplomatic life. You get into something where you're really trying to make a lot of progress.